This is Chris Oatley's Artcast, episode 88. Interview with Jason Brubaker, DreamWorks visual development artist and creator of reMIND, Part 1. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Chris Oatley's Artcast. I'm Chris Oatley. A former Disney artist, gone rogue, I'm now the director of the Oatley Academy of Visual Storytelling, where I get to work every day with the most positive, passionate, collaborative community of creatives I have ever known. You can find more art and story podcasts from some of the most inspiring voices in animation, games, VFX, comics, and new media at oatleyacademy.com/shows. Edge, Justin, welcome to the show.
All right.
For those who don't know, Edgewa Ebeneba, aka Edge, is our editorial assistant at the Oatley Academy, and Justin Copeland is one of my co-hosts on the Paper Wings show, our podcast about visual storytelling. They've joined me to introduce this episode and share some exciting news. Folks ask us all the time, how can I support the Artcast? How can I support the Paper Wings show? And we've never really had a good answer, except for, well, you can talk about it on social media, say nice things, leave us a review in iTunes, and all of those things are, of course, appreciated. But when people go out of their way to write us, they're usually asking about financial support. So we've been trying to think of a way to create this opportunity since there's so much interest and generosity. And, of course, we deeply appreciate that, because your support means we make more shows, and better shows, in fact. But we never want to ask for support without offering something in return. And at the Oatley Academy, we never offer anything unless we think it's awesome.
Yep,
right.
exactly.
We have to be completely in love with the thing before we offer it to anyone else. And so we created the Oatley Academy Backstage Pass. With your Backstage Pass subscription, you, of course, get a personal reward in the knowledge that you are supporting a school that provides more free resources than most other art schools, online or otherwise. But you also get access to the extended versions of our podcasts, tons of bonus content, and a brand new exclusive podcast called Escape from Art Jail, where we help you pursue creative freedom by overcoming the challenges most of us would rather avoid: money, social media, and running a creative business. What a lot of folks don't realize is that our interviews for the Artcast and the Paper Wings show, they sometimes go 2.5, 3, even 3.5 hours at times.
No exaggeration there.
Right, yeah. The whole goal is to create, obviously, a very intimate, in-depth conversation. And our editor, Kevin Chandler, he really is an artist.
Yes.
And he always creates this extended version first, and then we sort of have a conversation about what the theatrical release should sound like, the podcast cut should sound like. But with our download numbers, and I know it sounds probably to some of you like I'm bragging when I say that, I'm not. That's not the intent. It's just the fact of the matter that with our download numbers, a show with a 3.5-hour interview plus the bookends would be cost prohibitive and just logistically overwhelming for everyone who works on the show, at least for general distribution. And yet, the extended versions are the whole story. They contain more backstory, more industry history, more life lessons, more geeky details about the creative process.
Yeah, I love those personal touches. There's so many of those.
Me too. To be specific, the Backstage Pass currently features extended versions of the Jason Brubaker episode, which we're going to hear the podcast version, or at least part one of the podcast version today. We'll talk about that momentarily. Also, extended interviews with Armand Serrano, Jen Ely, Justin Rodriguez, and more. Also, with the Artcast, I don't think we have this with Paper Wings, but with the Artcast, we have some deleted scenes. We've been doing the Artcast for so long, and we've experimented with the format of the show so much. There were entire segments that got cut. In fact, Justin, you did one that it was great. We just had to cut it because we changed the format of the show before we were able to roll out that episode. Do you remember we did the facial expressions discussion in story and storyboarding? And that's in there. And then something that you and Jeff Wamister and I did about writing professional emails.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
That's in there. And just all kinds of good stuff. And then, of course, with the Paper Wings show, we have extended interviews with Eric Canetti, Raina Telgemeier, Claire Keane, and of course, we didn't stop there. Did we, Edge?
Nope.
We created an exclusive podcast just for the Backstage Pass subscribers. The show is called Escape from Art Jail, and though I think everybody listening to this podcast episode can relate to this idea of being locked up in art jail, Edge, can you share a little bit with the Artcast audience?
In Escape from Art Jail, we discuss difficult topics that a lot of artists seem to avoid. It gets intense and it covers a lot of really difficult things to talk about, but they're necessary. And we're so excited to finally be tackling these things because it seems that most people just don't talk about any of this, you know?
Yeah.
And so many artists are like asking all these questions and no one's answering them. And so we're going to do it.
Yeah, to help other artists achieve commercial success as well as creative success. Any artist who has done any kind of work for hire, whether that's in a studio or via freelance, knows that it's not enough to be a good artist. You have to be a good business person as well. And the industry is only becoming more and more competitive by the minute. And so we think now is the perfect time for this new show.
The thing that struck me about Escape from Art Jail is, the social landscape changes every day. And it seems to do that, a lot faster. And there are lots of different ways to grow, monetarily from, your art. And, what should I be doing? Like, what's this new thing, And I feel like Escape from Art Jail is like the perfect place to stay current on all those things, and have somebody to talk to about them.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, Justin, because obviously the show will cover all the timeless topics, like attracting art directors and what I like to refer to as selfless self-promotion. But we also cover current and often time-sensitive topics. In fact, episode 3 features a guide to the newest, easiest, and what will be for some the most powerful way to monetize your art online. And there exists what we believe to be a legitimate urgency to set it up and begin experimenting with it. So we'll cover both timeless and time-sensitive topics. The contracts question always comes up. The taxes questions always come up. The how do I promote my work? How do I feel anonymous? That question just comes up all the time. I have no sense of direction. Comes up all the time. And
bad clients.
Oh my God. Yeah. Bad clients. How do I deal with that and navigate those situations? And we want you to win. It's like we really do. We want you to win. We know what it's like to be stuck in art jail. We know that feeling. We know that feeling of just being completely either isolated or restrained in some way, and we want you to break free. We are almost ready for launch.
So close.
So we are so close. We're just inches from the finish line. And so if you would like to be notified on the day we go live with the Backstage Pass, just go to oatleyacademy.com/BSPN. That's as in Backstage Pass notification. Again, that's oatleyacademy.com/BSPN. Join the notification list there, and we will email you as soon as the Backstage Pass becomes available. Well, we have quite an interview here with Jason Brubaker.
Oh, man.
You don't know Jason Brubaker until you listen to this,
Oh my God. And that's the thing. He's a good friend. And I feel like that was my reality in conducting the interview. And there's actually something special about this interview. We do 2 parts. So this part for the Artcast, then part 2 is for the Artcast. And in those episodes, we focus on Jason's career in the mainstream. So his career as an independent comics creator, that obviously comes up throughout the conversation, but the real focus is on his career at DreamWorks, how he got to DreamWorks, his time as a visual development artist there. And then right where we get to the point where he escapes DreamWorks, the Paper Wings show is actually going to pick up the story. And then we'll do the independent side of Jason's career there for the Paper Wings show. And you and Laura did that interview, Justin.
Yep. He's such a sweet guy, man.
Oh, he's amazing. Cool dude. Yeah, I want to be Jason Brubaker when I grow up. That's basically the case. And he's an example to all of us because he's experienced tremendous success in both the mainstream and the independent realms. And the guy is so prolific and inspiring and humble. So in this introductory episode, we talk about Jason's background, of course. He shares some stories from his upbringing, and it's interesting. Well, I don't want to spoil anything, but you'll really enjoy hearing his about his very unorthodox background, and then
it's very surprising. Yeah,
really. And then we lead up basically to the part where he breaks in as a live action story artist. Mm-hmm. And the very inspiring and yet kind of mind-boggling path that he took to get there. And then in part 2, of course, we'll get to DreamWorks. And so once again, if you would like to be notified as soon as the Oatly Academy Backstage Pass becomes available, go to oatlyacademy.com/BSPN. Join the notification list. We will email you when we launch, and you can be among the first to get your hands on the extended versions of the Artcast, the Paper Wings show, our new exclusive podcast, Escape from Art Jail, and I didn't even mention the school talks. I've been recording the Q&A sessions that I do at art schools all over the country, well, and kind of the world if you count Canada as a separate country, and those are there too. I forgot to mention that. So yeah, and there's more on the way. So yes, oatlyacademy.com/BSPN. And we should be launching in a couple weeks here. So watch your inbox, and we would just love to have you join us there backstage at the Oatly Academy. And thank you, Edge and Justin, for joining me for this introduction.
Yay! Thanks for having us.
Pleasure, man. Yeah.
And so let's get to the Jason Brubaker interview. Take us back to Idaho.
St. Mary's, Idaho.
St. Mary's, Idaho.
Yep. I don't even remember that town because I think I passed through it once since then. Because my parents were missionaries. So right after I was born, they went to Switzerland. We stayed there for a couple years.
I didn't know that.
Apparently I learned French, and we went to Africa, and there were missionaries there, Christian missionaries there in Africa, and we lived like right next to grass huts and stuff, and I spoke to the kids and played with the Africans, and we have all these pictures of me being this little kid in Africa, but I know voiture means car.
and hang on. Okay, how long were you in Switzerland?
2 years.
And what age did you move there?
I must have been like 1 or just barely turned 2.
Oh, wow.
It was 2 years that we were there because my parents were learning French, and then they moved to Africa for another 2 years. So I came back when I was like 5-ish. That's when I came back. It's a real vague memory, though,
I have a few super blurry memories of being 5. I don't think I remember anything before that.
Yeah.
So after the return to Idaho.
Well, my grandparents and uncles all have farms in Idaho. And so we kind of lived on a house there. And I went to like first grade and stuff and at a school about 30 minutes drive away, I think. And then eventually my dad started going to college to become an electrical engineer. So we moved to Moscow, Idaho. Lived there for a couple years, and then we ended up moving to actually Brigham City, Utah when he got a job. Stayed there for a couple years, like I think 6 years there, and then we moved back to Idaho. So I was in a lot of transition
Right.
When I was young, it's like every 2 years we'd move, it seemed like.
Right.
So at least move houses or something.
What was that like for you? Did you understand that's a lot of moving?
I didn't think it was a big deal at the time.
Right.
In fact, I feel like part of that has really helped me because it helps me just be able to walk into a situation and say, life is going to change now. I can make new friends. I can do things here and it's going to be fine. And I mean, I still have friends from almost all those places I've lived. I mean, once I got a little older anyway, in junior high and high school. And so there's a handful of friends that I still will contact every now and then through email, and it's fun to see them, So it's not like the friendships didn't matter because they were short. Some of my best friends were from those times.
Yeah.
So after we moved back to Idaho, we lived in Pocatello. When I was like halfway through high school, we moved back there. And then I moved to Indiana with my brother to try to pursue like getting money for college.
How old were you then in Indiana?
Well, I was like 19, I think, when I moved there. I tried to save up money to go to the Joe Kubert School of Graphic Art and Designs to do the comics.
Yeah.
So I got this construction job with my brother making camper trailers. And I was like, I can make $400 a week. This is amazing,
Right.
So I was saving up money, and then my brother went on his honeymoon and I wrecked his car on accident. And so all my money I saved up, it was like $3,000.
No.
Yeah, it was like $3,000 at that point. I was like, Marty, here's the money. You can buy a new car. It's basically all the money I have to make up for this wrecked car. That was a low in my life. Wrecking the brother's car on his honeymoon. So all my college money went to that, and I moved back to Idaho. Then I was like, forget it. I guess I'm not going to college.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. Well, let's get back to that. How about art and story? How do those weave into this pre-car wreck in Indiana?
Well, ever since I could remember, I was just fascinated with, anything to do with storytelling and mixed with drawing. And I think when I was younger, I just associated that with drawing. I just loved drawing.
Right.
I wanted to be an artist.
It's the same thing.
But yeah, when I got older, I realized that it's like the storytelling facet of it is what I want, because, someone can pay me to just draw pictures, but I don't get that same feeling from,
Yeah.
And so, anyway, that's kind of moving forward. But so I always loved it. And, like the first thing I really started clinging to was, like the comic strips in the paper, like Garfield and Peanuts. And then Calvin and Hobbes, when that came out, was, every artist seems to love Calvin and Hobbes. And I can agree.
Yeah.
I can see why. And then, I never really got into comics much. But then one day my dad brought me some Spider-Man comics, and I was like, wow, these are actually kind of neat, And then Todd McFarlane started doing like Spider-Man. And that's when I really started turning towards comics. Like, these artists are really, unique. It's not just everyone doing the same thing. But like Disney, everyone would always ask me, you want to work for Disney when you grow up? And I'd be like, I don't want to draw bunnies like the Disney bunnies. That's not my thing.
Right.
But all these individual artists who were just doing their style, that was really cool to me, And I don't really know why, because nobody else in my family was an artist. But I was just always inspired by that. And I would make my own little comics, in grade school. I had this weird, strange character. It was just like a really strange version of Garfield. And I called him Spud. And, it was just a complete ripoff of Garfield. And then later I had this one called Scruffy. And I actually got that published in the local paper in Brigham City when I was 11.
Wow.
They ran it every week for, I don't know, it must have been about a year. So I'd, draw these little Scruffy comics, and my mom would take it to the office, to the paper. I mean, it was a super small town. The paper came out once a week. And so the whole town kind of knew me as Scruffy at that time. Like, I wasn't popular, very much in school, but everyone knew me as Scruffy. So I remember the popular kids were like, hey, Scruffy. And I was like, wow, the popular kid talked to me. When I was in high school, that's kind of when I switched gears to comics, like superhero type comics. And I did this little series. I made 5 issues of this comic called Phobos. Mm-hmm. And I actually got that published. I sent that to all the publishers I could find. And this publisher called Samson Comics published it nationwide. That was a big deal back then. So that was in high school. And there was actually the bad guy in that was a cat.
Well, what do you know? So
it's kind of interesting. But, I was obsessed with hiding turtles in my comics at that time. So I always thought turtles would be my thing. But for some reason, it's evolved to cats.
Wow. We were just talking to somebody about this, and I can't remember who it was. It might have been Eric Canetti. But we were just talking to someone about how in the development of an artist, there's an important moment where you become conscious of the stylistic choices that an individual artist is making. And that Image in the 90s was that moment for so many people because they were all famous in their own way. And I think there was something about that, that it's almost like who's your favorite Beatle kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, see, that whole Image time period, that spoke to me as like the artists can rise up and take over, because they were all from Marvel. They were all doing the Marvel books, and everybody wanted the artist style. They wanted the artist to write it and draw it their way. It wasn't about following Spider-Man anymore. It was about following the artist. And that was so powerful, And suddenly it was like, what's my style? I like his style. Who's that style?
Exactly.
And that's what it became about. And in a way, it kind of sent me off into a weird path of like becoming the style. And nowadays, when I talk to people about style and they ask me how to get their style, I'm always cautious about it. I'm just like, just copy everyone you love, and your style will, kind of form out of that.
Right.
It's not something that consciously happens, I don't think. It's just everything you love is your style.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was such a powerful moment, such a defining time, I think, for me. And even though I trailed away from comics, I started doing storyboards, and it's like funny that I'm going back there now.
Yeah.
I'm going to be 40, in a week. And it's like, it's so strange that that's still the path I'm going on,
Yeah.
so many years later.
Yeah, Doug TenNapel talks about that, about how comics are the best, and I mean, I don't think he actually actually, knowing Doug, he probably does actually mean that, but, but he's right in many ways in that it can be anything you want, and yet you, the individual, can theoretically still make the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so for a person who is in love with both art and story, it is a very powerful medium.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So take us back to Africa really quick here. You're in these very rural villages in Africa. Were you accessing Calvin and Hobbes and things like that there somehow?
No. I remember we came back and my aunt was like, "You've got to see Star Wars." And my dad was like, "What's Star Wars?"
Wow.
It's like, and it was when Empire Strikes Back was coming out. And so
Wow.
my dad took us all to see Star Wars. And I had my eyes closed practically the whole time because it was like, I don't know what it is I'm looking at, but it's awesome. And the sounds, I remember the sounds because I had my eyes closed. They were just so like intense, and like it just kind of blew me away, but it was a little too much for my brain because all I knew was running around in the dirt at that point.
Right.
I don't think I did even much drawing either, because all my books, like my little drawing books and like stick figure books that I made, that was all after we came back and we had a lot of paper and staples and crayons and stuff. But I don't remember anything to do with much art back in that time. I mean, I was also too young, but I have a stacks of little books that I made after we came back, though, that my mom still has.
Right.
So.
That's awesome. So there is something about the accessibility of the materials that really,
I think so,
catapulted you.
I guess.
Do you think Star Wars was a catalyst, or was it just like a fun experience, or did you make a connection to your art and story?
No, there was a definite catalyst there. I mean, I think it just showed me how insanely huge storytelling could be. Because before that, it was kind of just like, yeah, there's stories. There's little ideas here and there. But Star Wars was kind of like an epic universe. It was so like life-threatening and large and grand, Wow. And the visuals, and I mean, that's really, it's like there's not, before that, what was there? There was really cheesy attempts at sci-fi, at least when I look at them, but Star Wars still feels completely like amazing now, even if you watch the remastered back to the old original version.
Yeah, right.
People can say what they want about it, but man, the first 20 minutes is just you're following R2-D2 around, and there's not really much words. It's just you're just pushed into this strange environment.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview with Damon Lindelof. He was talking about Star Wars, and he was talking about what you're saying, which is unapologetically, the story just flings you into this world.
Yeah.
Damon was talking about how he's like, it's almost as if George is thinking, just drop them into the world as if this thing has always existed and they'll figure it out.
You know, I think that word unapologetic, that word has really helped me, I guess, because when I was trying to do my comic as a animation, and I decided to do it as a graphic novel, and I was like pitching like movie ideas, I talked to the producer of Ren and Stimpy, and he says, you just got to do your stuff unapologetically. And I didn't really understand it fully, but I kept thinking about it. And I've really embraced that because I think it's so true. You know, whether you're talking about faith or just like you were saying, like dropping someone into this world and letting them figure it out. You know, so many people waste so much time like trying to like cover all their bases and everything. I mean, I connect also with that unapologetic word with like Miyazaki's films. I feel like he's completely unapologetic because it's like you're
that's
just
true.
propelled, thrown into this world, and okay, you know, you're going to be here for 2 hours, and then you leave, and you're like, wow, I experienced something. It wasn't explained to me, but I experienced something, and I got it, you know, and I'll accept it.
It's almost as if that unapologetic decision, you know, that decision to just do what he does is the key that unlocks the greatness of every single one of his films. Part of the thing that makes him so amazing is the just radical choices, the stuff that you see and you love it, but you would never have thought of it in a million years. You know, it's so uniquely him.
Yeah.
And it's almost like he has to not apologize.
Yeah.
But then in his decision not to apologize for his work, it allows him to just go all Alice in Wonderland on us.
Yeah.
That's pretty fascinating. And John Kay is another example of that.
Yeah, that's true.
And his work is definitely distinct and in a lot of ways definitive.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, so don't apologize, people. Stop apologizing. So, all right. Drawing explosion when you get back to the States. Calvin and Hobbes, and then in the early 90s, you get swept up into the image frenzy. Yeah. How old were you when that Todd McFarlane thing was happening? You're what, 12?
I guess I was in junior high. I don't even know what age that would make me.
Yeah, I think I was like 13 around that time, if I remember correctly.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, okay. So almost teenage years or close to teenage years. So then you spend your teenage years super into mainstream comics?
Not really. I mean, I did collect some mainstream, but it was more about collecting the artist. So I liked Sam Keith, so I'd find all his stuff, you know, find his old stuff. I would always like to find their old stuff to see where they came from, how they evolved to where they were now. You know, there was, you know, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Eastman and Laird. I don't know when the originals came out, but I collected the trades that were color.
Me too.
I still have those. It's like there's very few books that I really hold on to forever, and those are some of them.
Yeah, I've still got mine. I'm looking at them right now.
And like the Cerebus, you know, that was like an indie thing, and then, you know, Bone, when that started coming out, started getting that, and you know, it was just kind of like it was embracing all these different styles and seeing that, you know, all these artists are kind of doing their own thing, but it's all working. But that was also the time when comics were making millions of dollars. So everything was allowed to work because you just had to put a number 1 on it and variant cover and it would make sales. So, but then, you know, after a while, it's like when comics kind of nosedive, I kind of lost interest in a lot of it. And I think I lost interest because it became again about making something that would sell.
Right. Death of Superman.
Yeah. Instead of an artist doing something really amazing, you know, like, oh, Youngblood's doing good. Okay. We'll make 4 different Youngblood comics, all by different artists. It doesn't matter who the artist is, as long as they're pretty good. That's not what I was interested in. You know, I wanted to see Eric Larson and Todd McFarlane and Sam Keith doing new art, because that's what I was following.
Right.
And if there's a new artist that came and started another style that was really cool, I would collect that. It wasn't about collecting spin-offs and knockoffs and imitations of this other artist, you know? So that's what really killed it for me. And I would imagine that's what killed it for a lot of people.
One of the big frustrations is that after the sort of honeymoon period of that whole image thing, books were late. There'd be series that would just vaporize, basically, and then lots of false starts after that.
And just like, what was it like after like issue 10 of Spawn, like someone else was drawing it, from that point on.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, I don't need to collect it anymore,
And the thing is I remember being, I don't know, maybe in college and seeing Spawn and actually liking that artist's work better than Todd McFarlane's work. But at the time, it was that same thing. It was like, well, Todd isn't remaining committed to this. Why should I? And not that I was that articulate about the concept, but I think that's basically what was going on.
I think so too. Reflecting back on it now, it seems like that's kind of how it went for me too. And I think that's kind of why nowadays it's like, I keep getting asked if in the future with my, publishing empire, if you want to call it that, even that, if I would want to get other people to take over my stories and so I could expand and do more stuff. And it's like, it doesn't really sound that exciting, even though I could potentially make more money maybe, or get a lot more books done. It's just like, that's the thing that really turned me off of comics for 10 years. Yeah. And so it's like, I don't really want to go down that same path. I would rather just take the time to put out something that's me, that I like it. And, I think the fans will stick with it.
Hugh McLeod, who wrote Ignore Everybody, which is a fantastic book.
I've never heard of it.
Oh, it's so good. I think you'd really like it. He says, art starts suffering the minute people start paying for it. And I think as commercial artists, whether that's true in the purest sense or not, I think it's valuable to us to consider. And I think it's an important thing to just always have in our minds. And, what you're talking about is, at the very least, we can say that Todd McFarlane's relationship to Spawn suffered because he was making Spawn the movie, or, and all these other things. And he made a lot of cool stuff. I mean, he started that whole McFarlane Toys line that was fantastic. It's not that the other stuff he was working on wasn't good. I mean, I think he was investing in other creative endeavors that I think were arguably worthwhile, but the thing that started it all, he abandoned so quickly.
Yeah. It's like an interesting dilemma too, because it's like, as artists, it's like that quote from the, where artwork starts suffering the moment you
people start paying for
it. I think there's part of it that's correct. I just, it seems to me like it suffers when artists worry about the money.
Yeah.
And that's been a dilemma I've always had with my stuff. Like, as soon as I started getting some success with reMIND and stuff, suddenly there was a whole bunch of other burdens laid on me that I was trying to like get through, which were like, well, I don't want to sell out. Well, I don't want to, if I could continue reMIND, but then it was not what I want to do. But if I do what I want to do, my audience won't like it.
Right.
And I had to just finally scrap all that worry and say, I need to do this the same way I did reMIND, where I'm just like, I'm doing it because I think it's cool. I love it. And this is the message I want to tell,
Right.
And it's hard to get back to that point once money is involved.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to make sure the money continues.
Yeah, but at the same time, we're not trying to go just create something in a vacuum and with no regard for whether someone will buy it or not. It's like, we're commercial artists. We want to sell this.
Exactly. Otherwise, you just draw it and put it in your drawer. And that's, some people say that that's all that matters to them, but then you hear everything they say and it's all about getting to be the big time movie or something.
Right.
So it's like, I can't get upset with Todd McFarlane for going, I want to make a movie now. I want to do this now, because that's where I want to be as an artist, where I'm not worried about changing course. If I feel like that's what I need to do, if I'm led to believe that that's what I need to do, I'm going to want to do it, and I'm have to make those decisions all my life and career. So it's weird, because I'm upset at Todd for not doing his comic, but but then I want people to accept me to do what I want to do.
Yeah, you want the
and
same
not be
freedom.
mad at me.
Right.
So it's really kind of, I'm being a total hypocrite saying it.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's kind of this weird dilemma,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and just to wrap that thought up, I don't think that art starts suffering the minute people start paying for it.
Yeah.
I think that there is a balance. So. And I think that, yes, all of us are going to tip one direction or the other, kind of off balance. But then the goal is we'll correct we'll course correct, we'll balance back out. And that's why we need each other.
Yeah.
So you were 19 in Indiana and you had to give up your college fund.
Mm-hmm.
What happened next?
I moved back. I got in my $400 Honda that I bought. And I had a radiation symbol painted on the hood of it, and
it's hilarious.
And drove with my friend 30 hours. I think it was like around 30-hour road trip back home to Idaho. And I was like, all right, I'm going to just work on my portfolio. I'm going to go for it. Even when I was in Indiana, I would, work on comic submissions every night after work. And in fact, that almost inspired me or motivated me to do it more, because I was working a construction job and I was like, okay, this is what life's going to be like unless I get this comic thing right and get this art thing right and do it. I'm going to be working construction all my life. And, there's nothing wrong with construction, but I didn't feel like that was my thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you see me, I'm like you.
Yeah.
I'm like this little skinny guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I really put in the time and I submitted stuff every month. I would submit packages of 30 or so submissions to all the different editors I could find. And I kept getting better and better responses to these submissions. And one editor sent me a whole photocopied couple Andrew Loomis books.
Wow.
And stuff. I mean, an inch thick, photocopied and bound at Kinko's type stuff. Saying you're good, just work on these parts, work on perspective. Here's some stuff to check out.
Wow. It
kept motivating me to keep working at it because I didn't get the classic Marvel submission editor response form. I have about 4 letters from him.
Oh wow.
But so I really focused on just submitting stuff to people, and I came back to Idaho. Just kept working at it. And then I was like, okay, I got to get a job. So I got a job at the local grocery store and kept working on my submissions. We'd stay up at night in Denny's all night almost. I mean, well, really late until about 2 o'clock actually, because that's when the bars closed and all the drunk cowboys came in. So we would stay up, until about 2 every night at Denny's. We made friends with everyone there, so we'd get free coffee and free Coke because we were all broke,
Yeah.
And me and my friends would stay up and draw comics at night and then go to work in the morning. And all of our goals were the same. Like, we're going to get submissions done and submit it and get a comic job.
That's amazing that in such a small town you had art friends. I mean, I get emails all the time from people that are like, nobody around here is into art, let alone the same kind of art I am.
Well, it was cool. We had a comic store that was started by a teacher and who was an art teacher and a couple other guys. And they would have like a little art drawing club. And so they would pull people in from even the surrounding towns. And so I became really good friends with this guy, Brian Brettauer, who was from the neighboring town, which was, I don't even know how long it was, 20 minutes drive out. And it was like a town of 400 people, like that kind of thing. So he would drive in and we became friends and saw each other's work. And we would publish these little photocopied type comics made at Kinko's, of our stuff. And so we're like, okay, well, he's serious about it because he published a photocopied comic,
Wow.
And so we started hanging out, and then there was another guy who came into town, and he would hang out with us and draw, and we're like, wow, he's really good, So it was just kind of like this little group of us, and we would come and go. We made friends with an awful lot of people that came in and out of Denny's, and so some people would sit with us and just smoke, and other people would actually bring in something to work on.
Wow.
But it was kind of me and this other guy, Brian, who were kind of the core drawing people.
Wow.
And other people would come and go. Yeah, so we just sat there in Denny's. This lasted for a year or couple of years maybe. And then we started trying to do the convention thing. And so we would plan road trips to San Diego Comic-Con.
Wow.
And I think we did that for 2 years. A big van of us or whatever would go up and get a hotel, and we would all sleep on the floor. And, and
had you been to cons before at all?
No.
Okay.
No, San Diego was the first one I went. It was like 94, I think, maybe 95. I remember going in, it was big. It's not near as big as it is now, but it was amazing meeting the artists and seeing all the artwork, and there's portfolio reviews. And I think that was, before like really focusing at Denny's. And so the next year we had like made all these submissions. We're going to bring them to Comic-Con and we're going to get a job, and that was the focus. That was the goal, So we went in. I remember standing in every portfolio line, and I had made like the set of 4 Wildstorm pages, and I had spent like so long on weeks on them, just really perfecting them, and started showing them to everybody along with other things. And it started kind of turning some heads, and I started getting some responses. And that second year, I think I went home with 8 offers. I remember.
Wow.
They were all the way from little dinky comic companies saying, yeah, you could do this for free, all the way up to an offer from an agent in LA who represented storyboard artists. Mm-hmm. And so went back home, and there's a whole bunch of other stories, but whatever, I'll pass.
Wait, what?
One of the offers was from Ricky Rocket.
Okay.
He's the drummer of Poison. And he started a comic book company. Now, in my book, I talk about a rock star who wanted to hire me, and that's not Ricky Rocket. Ricky Rocket was awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, Ricky Rocket was awesome. He was the coolest guy ever. He was totally legit and, wanted to pay me. And we went and visited him and showed him a comic we're working on. And just the nicest guy ever. Wow. We have pictures with him and everything. We're like, we're friends with a rock star. So we drove back home, and we were I just started like trying to do storyboards. So I'd pause, films and draw those frames and go forward a little bit and pause and draw the next frame. I'd do that with commercials just to try to build a little bit of portfolio for what the agent wanted. And then me and my friend planned a road trip where we would we'd go see Ricky Rocket, and then we would go to Famous Frames kind of as a second option if Ricky Rocket didn't work out.
And to be clear, Famous Frames is the company that this agent represented.
Exactly. Yeah. Famous Frames represents storyboard artists, and they're really big in LA. They service a lot of companies. I didn't really know much about, all that either. So I had a little portfolio. We also had like a 9-page comic we drew for Ricky Rocket, and we wanted him to color it and publish it. So we went and met with him. But he was like, I don't think we have the money to do a color version. We could do it black and white. And so we were kind of like, that's cool, but, I don't know. And so I was like, you know what? We're in LA still already, so let's just go see Famous Frames. So I went down to Famous Frames and called him and said, hey, I can come show you some stuff. So I met with the agent that met with me at Comic-Con. And I walk in the door. There's all these different agents. They're like, Brian, there's Disney on the phone for you. And he's like, okay, hold on, Jason. I need to get this. Warner Brothers on the phone for you. And my mind was just like blown. Like, this is the real deal, and all this art and all these, it was like really serious. Like, this is Hollywood, Wow. And so I showed them my stuff, and they liked it. And they're like, well, we can get you work if you can figure out how to move out here type thing. And I'm like, okay. I go, in 2 months, I'll be out here. And I just kind of like made that deal to him. Like, 2 months I'll be ready and I'll be able to move out here somehow. I don't know how, but I'll do it. He's like, all right. So I drove up. Oh, wait. Well, about a month before that, Brian called me, the agent called me, and he said, hey, we have this movie script. They're interested in you. We told them that, you're experienced and you would know what to do. And I'm like, but I'm not. And they're like, well, it's okay. They wouldn't accept you otherwise. But you have an interview with them if you can come up here and go do an interview with them. It's for Warner Brothers. I was like, okay, that's cool. So they
Wait, when was out. This in the... Okay. Oh, they flew you to LA?
They flew me to LA when I was still in Idaho, and they put me up in this little seedy hotel room and gave me the script, and it was for The Matrix. And they're like, this is Wachowski brothers. These guys are new. They, they have this great idea, and they think it's going to be big. So, impress them.
Wow.
And so I'm like, okay. I had my like Phobos comic and a bunch of submissions for comics and just a handful of storyboards, So I stayed up until like 3 a.m. reading the script. I didn't get all the way through it. The agent picked me up that morning, took me to Warner Brothers. I went into this office, and there was the Wachowski brothers. They were nobody at the time. Nobody really knew who they were. I remember it vividly. I started flipping through my samples, And I just started talking really, really fast about everything I'd worked on in my whole entire life. And then this is the other picture that I drew for this other guy, and it was really neat. And then this is my comic book, and there's some stuff that I really need to fix up. But anyway, there's these storyboards that I did from this commercial, and and I remember they were all real excited and happy to to look at everything. That's and going And then the producer puts his hand on my shoulder. It's this big old heavy hand. He's like, "Son, slow down. We can't understand a word you're saying."
That's so gracious, though.
And so, And so after that, I just kind of like shut up and I was like, "Here." And I kind of just like gave it to him.
Wow.
And so obviously I didn't impress him very much. And my agent told me later, he's like, "Yeah, they really liked your work, but they just didn't think you had enough past experience."
Right. Yeah. That's hilarious.
Like, really?
Wow, that would have been crazy if you'd worked on The Matrix. I mean, that's insane. I want to ask 3 quick questions before we move past The Matrix. Why was there a radiation symbol on your car?
That's a question
what kind of music were you into?
Okay, let me just back up and say I have a radiation symbol tattooed on my leg.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
And I wear pants to this day in the summer because I don't want to explain to people what it means because it doesn't have really a meaning.
It was just intense.
Like a cool symbol that I was like, radiation, yeah, it's a cool symbol. I'm going to stamp that on everything. And so, in my young teenage years, I was like, I'm going to do this without my parents knowing about it, getting a radiation symbol on my leg.
Right.
So anyway, and
that's funny.
It's easier to get away with it on your car than
on your leg.
On a tattoo.
Yeah. When did you get the tattoo then?
Really shortly after I moved here, like a month after I moved to LA. I'm like, I'm away from the home. I'm away from my parents, so I'm going to get a radiation symbol.
Oh my God. That is amazing.
Strange.
Oh,
so, I don't know. It was just visual,
Yeah.
For me, that's all it was. It was a cool visual thing.
But were you into like metal or anything that was kind of intense in that way? No.
No. I mean, I liked Nirvana. Nirvana was my band.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. So was I. Yeah. I was on that. I was on that bandwagon.
I've grown my hair out again just now because I looked back at some pictures of Kurt Cobain. I was like, that would be cool. I should do that now that I'm in my midlife crisis.
Oh, that's great. That's amazing.
I may never grow out my hair again, so I got to do it now.
Interesting that you bring this up, though, because I've never had anxiety really about aging per se, but I have since I turned 36, as I'm sort of now I'm starting to approach 40 and I started to feel a little bit anxious about that. And I don't know why. I mean, I can't really explain it. I mean, except for the fact that, you're just reminded of your own mortality. But then something else happened. And that is that I started listening to Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana again. And I mean, I've put those albums on, on my iPod or whatever at different points, throughout my entire life. But the point being, I had an epiphany the other night where I was thinking about real midlife crises. Like really dangerous, like damaging ones that ruin marriages and this kind of thing. Yeah. And I'm sure, both of us have seen that for real happen in other people's lives. And so I was thinking about that and just about how safe I feel, both in my own marriage and just in my life, and how really in the grand scheme of things, how minimal any anxiety that I have about aging is. And I was just thinking about how I don't feel any need to go buy an expensive car or any of these kind of cliche things. And at the time I was rocking out to Soundgarden. I mean, just like I was driving down the road and just blasting it in my car. And I became conscious of the fact that this music is a key. It's not the answer. It's not the only thing that's helping me assuage any anxiety that I have about aging, but it's making a big impact on me. I have enough distance from my high school years and my early college now that overall that music conjures very positive feelings. And I realized that a midlife crisis is so much about a denial of reality and the desire to turn back the clock to literally achieve the impossible. That is you are trying, despite the fact that it's impossible, you are actually trying to reverse the aging process. And I realized that instead, the celebration of the great things about that time of my life. I made a lot of bad decisions during that time too, but I'm past that stuff. So what I have now is the good stuff that came of that. You know, the person that I am now, the safety that I do feel, and the security that I do feel in my career and my relationships and my marriage and my future role as a father. So in other words, only the positive stuff remains. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have any regrets or that I don't ever feel bad about decisions I made in my life. But the music is in many ways what unlocked that. I mean, Chris Cornell singing his butt off, you know, Black Hole Sun, you know, it's like just there's this moment where I'm just going like, this is what I need. This is, and I honestly, I said to myself, I said, this is all you need, Chris. Like other people feel like they need to go buy an expensive car or, you know, cheat on their wives or, you know, whatever. You don't need that. All you need is Soundgarden. So I get that. And I think the hair thing, there's probably something real there, you know?
But I will say too, as I'm approaching 40, like a lot of people, you know, talk to me about it and say, oh yeah, you're getting old. And I'm just like, I'm excited about not getting old like 80, but I'm excited about aging because it's like, I'm doing things that I really feel like matter now. I'm not just lost and confused, getting pushed and tossed around and not figure anything out and just going with the trends and with what's, you know, just riding these weird waves. There's a reason that I'm here and, you know, I have so much life left in me and I can do a whole lot of it. And I'm excited about the future, you know? Yeah. But that's not to say we haven't gone through really difficult times too, to where it's like, it felt hopeless, where I felt hopeless. And I think that's what puts people into that phase is when you just feel hopeless, you just kind of like grasp at anything else that will take away that hopelessness. Yeah. I don't know exactly when the midlife crisis is supposed to be, if it's 40 or 50, but I'm just super excited. And I mean, I'm making decisions now that I feel like it's kind of like reminds me of my teenage years. Yeah. Like I'm quitting my job and I'm going to move.
Yeah, totally.
You know? And it kind of reinvigorates me because I don't necessarily, it's not like I'm saying I feel young, you know, because my body feels a lot older than it did. And I can't, you know, run like a mile or whatever it is. Yeah. I just feel like I'm doing things that matter now. So it's enjoyable.
Yeah. It's a really good feeling. It can be terrifying at times, but for the most part, it's a really good feeling to know that, like you said, you're calling the shots in your own life. Yeah. There's just nothing like it.
Yeah. It's weird. My stories are a lot about, even though it's not really out in your face like skulls and crossbones, but I grapple with death a lot in my stories. And it's because it's something I think about, you know, like what's beyond this life? What, you know, God, you know, heaven, hell type stuff. Yeah. And it's like, I really do feel confident in my faith too. And in God and, you know, and I believe that's a huge part of why I'm comfortable. You know, if I die tomorrow, I feel like I would be fine with it, which sounds horrible. You know, that's the kind of thing suicidal people you would think would say, but I don't feel like I'm going about it in a really selfish, demoralizing way. And I don't know. I don't know if you want to even leave this stuff in there.
No, it's important. But, I mean, it's honest, man. Angie and we were talking the other day about what we're grateful for, you know, and are grateful for our health and for each other and that kind of thing. And she said, I love that we both, meaning she and I, we're passionate, that the same things we're passionate about are the things we're able to do with our time. And I said, I had the same thought. And I realized that I am trying to build a school that outlasts me. I'm trying to build, and now it's not me anymore. It's us. We are trying to build a school that outlasts me and outlasts all of us. And that said, it's still very new. I mean, we're just entering our third year, so it's still a very new business. I don't know what would happen if I were to vanish suddenly for some reason. But even if that did happen, even if, you know, God forbid, some tragedy happened, I know that I've given it everything. I've given life my all. And I'm only accelerating that. Like, I'm only trying my best to be the best person I possibly can and be as generous as I possibly can with every frickin' day, and be more patient and more generous and not an a-hole to any, I mean, I'm just trying so hard to like, and I feel like the momentum, like the perpetual motion kind of thing happening, like it's building, right? Like my character is building and I'm healing in ways that I never did before. So in other words, it's not like I figured something out and then it's been fine ever since, I don't know, ever since I quit Disney, everything's been fine. It's not that. It's that I've been leaning into happiness and driving for it. And despite the struggle, I've given it my all. And that is the thing that even if it did get cut short, I still have tremendous peace in that my life has been full. And despite my regrets and despite all the wasted time in my life, now at this moment, I'm on the throttle, doing my best and on an incline, Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like, I think, not to bash, the careers and all the great jobs that are out there, but so many artists, I think, they focus all their energy on doing what someone else wants them to do,
right?
With their art. I feel like we all have a reason where we've been given what we've been given. You know what I'm saying? And it's like I always felt really frustrated in the careers and the jobs when it's like I have these ideas and these stories and these things that I feel like are important that I need to tell, but I can't do them. I feel like I'm not doing what I should be doing.
Right.
And it's in those moments in my life when I felt desperate about like, oh, I mean, that's when I would worry about death or worry about not doing the whatever, But now that I'm kind of just like saying, okay, I'm going to go for this and I'm going to do this thing, because there was a great speech that Steve Jobs did, slightly a year or so before he died to a college. I don't remember which college. And he talked about that whole thing. Like, if I ever wake up in the morning and I'm not happy with what I'm creating or doing, he's like, then why am I doing it?
God.
Like I need to do the thing that I'm supposed to be doing that I feel like needs to be done. Otherwise you're just wasting your life.
Yeah.
And so it's that, and it's hard to break out of that monotonous circle if you've been put into it, and everybody's put into it automatically.
Yeah.
I mean, in school, we're trained to be put into that circle.
Right.
And we're trained to just be a really good employee. And, there are times when it's good to be a good employee.
Yeah, totally.
But we're not all supposed to just be, mindless slaves.
Right.
I mean, again, I'm not saying they're all mindless slaves. There's great roles for, in great positions. And
right.
Some people love being accountants,
right.
So yes, do it,
Yeah.
But if you're not wanting to be an accountant,
right.
why are you doing it?
Yeah.
But if you want to be an accountant and instead you're a brain surgeon, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, where is your fulfillment? Like, where really is your sense of fulfillment? I just don't think we think about fulfillment very much. Like, I don't think that's actually on, our list of pursuits. Yeah. Generally speaking. And it was for me in a vague sense, but it wasn't until I understood what fulfillment felt like, and that was really starting that first generation of painting drama, the very first course I offered at Oatley Academy back in 2012. It wasn't until then that I really felt like all the energy flows of my life, of passions and interests and, whatever, all kind of just converged. And I went, oh, this is what it feels like to find your calling.
Yeah.
And that was crazy, absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Something I'm interested in is how you got the idea in your head that comics is a job. So you talked about the artists and becoming conscious of their style and or even being immediately aware of their different stylistic choices. But what about comics as a vocation? How did you get that idea?
Well, I guess it's because Eric Larson and Todd McFarlane, they were all making a living at it. And I think that's why when comics got slapped into my lap, and I started flipping through them, and it was kind of more about the artist,
right?
Doing the style that they wanted. Suddenly, it kind of connected the dots with Saturday morning, like newspaper type funnies.
Yeah,
like Jim Davis doing Garfield. But because I didn't really know if I wanted to do the the newspaper type comic strips, but wow, comics were just like, I can do all kinds of crazy, cool, fun stuff.
Right.
And it's really about the art. It's not just about a joke. It's about the art, and dynamic and action and cool characters and stuff. And so, I don't know, that's kind of when it really started making sense. And, because before that, it was all like in high school and stuff. My high school art teacher was like, seeing me draw comics, and he said, I remember specifically, and I mean, God bless the guy, but he says, you're never going to make any money in comics. You need to do watercolor paintings of still life and stuff. That's where the money's at. And I mean, he was serious, because that's kind of all there was in Idaho to possibly turn it someone's head. But there was really little money in art there, but I was like, what? That's not why I decided to start drawing, was to do still life stuff.
Did you understand that you could still live in Idaho, or that you could be in any city? Did you understand the freelance idea of it, that you could live anywhere?
When I went to the comic conventions, I think the first year, a lot of my friends had Vampire the Masquerade role-playing game books.
Okay.
And there was one artist in there, a cover artist, Tim Bradstreet, and his stuff was like photorealistic. But I could tell that he just traced it. And I was like, you guys, he's just tracing it. This is so easy to do. Anyone can do this. And they're like, yeah, right. Show us. I'm like, okay, come over to my house. I'll take some pictures of you in the dark room, and we'll hang a black curtain and I'll shine a spotlight on you. And so we did it. And I traced it on the light table and did some cross hatching, and it looked exactly like Tim Bradstreet's style. And they're like, dude, that's crazy. And I was like, okay, let me do you. Let me do one of you and you. Yeah. So I brought these pictures in my portfolio. I didn't want to show them to anyone because I didn't want to trace, for a living, even though it's totally fine. That's what I did when I was a storyboard artist.
Right.
But so we brought them, and I had all these comic submissions. Were a couple, because this was like the first year, I believe. And my friends went over to the White Wolf booth, which published this Vampire the Masquerade, and they're like, my friend can draw exactly like Tim Bradstreet, and he has a bunch of awesome pictures.
My goodness.
And he's like, well, bring him over here if he can do it. And so they all came to me, and they're like, you got to show them. They're waiting to see your pictures. We told them you could do it just like Tim Bradstreet. I was like, why'd you say that? And so I brought him over there reluctantly and showed him, and they're like, do you want to sign a contract? I can get you some work. And so that was my first job, like in art. Like my real paid job was doing White Wolf art. And so I kind of did that style, and I did like probably about 5 different White Wolf books, a lot of art in them. And so anyway, so that was my first job then actually in art. And that was from staying up working at Denny's.
Wow. I'm so glad I asked. So what do you think it was about your art that people were responding to? And from what you said about the tracing for White Wolf, it sounds like you hadn't arrived at your quintessential Jason Brubaker style that we all know and love now. So what were you doing stylistically then, and what do you think it was that hooked the Famous Frames guys, anyone else at Comic-Con that responded?
Since I was imitating so many artists like Todd McFarlane, like I feel like I could draw Todd McFarlane style, Eric Larson style, Sam Keith style. It was kind of like these popular styles, but then I would push them into my own thing. My focus was really on dynamic stuff, like foreshortening things, bending perspective. I practiced perspective like crazy. So wow. I don't know. I think it was like a real combination of all these different styles that just it felt familiar to them, but yet it was different. And I think I get that a lot still to this day. Like people find my stuff and they go, this feels so familiar to me. Like I've been looking at it for a long time. Wow. Like, but it's different. It's new. And I don't get it. And I think it's just because I've been imitating like artists from the 90s, And so they're familiar with all the quirks that I've been copying.
Right. Yeah.
So that might have had something to do with it, but I don't know. I just really pushed the action and the angular like motion lines, and I was really into anime, so I'd incorporate that. I don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah, it sounds very technical though.
There was a lot of technical in my early stuff.
Right. You were very adept.
Yeah. When I would do perspective, it was very technical. When I would do anatomy, it was very technical to try to, really get it figured out.
Right.
One thing at even a really young age, I think this really helped me, was I would see, Garfield. And I would be like, he draws his lines with these line weights. There's a certain form and shape. If I'm going to ever get professional, I need to be as good or better than that, Right. And it's like, it seems like so many people come into art saying, well, I'm not good enough, but, hopefully you'll like my style. Right. And they don't really worry about having their style look professional. And I really wanted to match the professionals so that if someone saw my work, they wouldn't know it was an 18-year-old kid doing it or a 20-year-old kid, Right. And so I would put in the time to like redo it and re-practice drawing hands so they looked exactly like a hand or whatever. And I feel like I've loosened up an awful lot now because there's a lot of things that are fun to do that are not right perspective and not correct anatomy. Right. Oh, yeah. And so I guess it's the whole thing of like, once you know the rules, you can break them. Right. And I break rules all the time now. It's just ridiculous. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that actually, I've told this story on the show before, but just to affirm what you're saying, I was the same way. And I hear all the time this blanket statement of don't compare your work to the work of others. As if just again, blanket statement, just don't ever compare your work because comparison is dangerous. You'll get depressed, you'll get overwhelmed, you'll want to quit. And that was not my relationship to comparison. The way I thought about comparison was inspiration, right? Yeah. And a little bit competitive, like you're saying. But I mean, it sounds like maybe your mindset was maybe more competitive than mine was. But I did have a bit of that. When I finally understood that visual development was a job, and that was around the time that the Star Wars prequels concept art books were hitting shelves. Around that time, and I think the world learned what concept art was, really, especially episode 2. That was the one with all the Ryan Church stuff in it, and that was the one I think that really resonated with me. And I would work with I had my computer monitor in front of me, my tablet on the table in front of my computer monitor. So I was working kind of straight on the monitor, and then my tablet on the desk in front of the monitor. And then on the left side of the monitor, I had The Art of Monsters, Inc., sometimes another Pixar movie, but usually Monsters, Inc., and one of my 5 or 6 favorite pages open, sitting next to the monitor. And then I had The Art of Star Wars Episode 2 or 3, depending, open on the right side of the monitor, also to some of my favorite pages. And I would paint and look at the monitor, and then I would look to the left and I'd look to the right. And I remember thinking, like, this is a spectrum, right? Because the Pixar stuff is so graphic and cartoony, and then the Star Wars stuff is so visceral and painterly and sci-fi. And I just remember being just inspired by that and looking at my paintings and going, is it that good? Is it that good? Is it that good? Is it that good yet? And that's how I would work. And no, it was never that good. I'm still not that good. And yet at the same time, that didn't bother me. I was instead motivated. Yeah. So comparison is not automatically a bad thing. That's what we're saying. Yeah. Yeah. It can be a motivating factor. I agree. It doesn't mean you're an awful person if you feel like the answer is no, it's not that good. But if it's the kind of comparison where it's like, he's 18, he was 20 and he did that, and I'm almost 20 and I'm not there yet, I'm not going to ever make it. That's not good. The minute it starts to disqualify you. If it puts fire under your butt, then yes, go for it. But as soon as you start saying, I'm a loser. Yeah. It's like, I don't know. But it's hard. I think every artist compares themselves, and you're always going to have hundreds and thousands probably of people better than you at everything you try to do. I do tell people to try to find one thing you can do better than anyone and focus on it, because it only takes one thing that you can do better than other people to raise eyebrows. You don't have to do, everything better. You don't have to be a better artist in all these different things. But if you can, if you're really good at drawing hair in a certain way, I don't know what it is. But it seems like that's always kind of been, a thing that's kind of pulled me into different careers. Right. Because I excelled at one specific little thing that they were like, wow, no one can do that like Jason, and it may not be something you can really describe either. So that's why I like telling people, don't focus on all your weaknesses. Just keep honing those strengths more and more and more, until you can get one little itty bitty part of your work to be better than everyone else's in that one little bitty part,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one strategy anyway. And I've done that myself,
Yeah, that's great. Well, this episode got super intense. Jason talked about the importance of trying to spend our limited time in meaningful ways. Do you have a passion to make meaningful art or tell meaningful stories? And if so, what are you doing to realize that passion? Join us for what I'm sure will be a positive, inspiring conversation at oatleyacademy.com/JB1, as in Jason Brubaker and the number 1. And join us next time for part 2, where Jason talks about how he got his big break at DreamWorks, doing motion graphics of all things, and how he eventually became a visual development artist. What job hasn't he done? That's the question. And don't forget to join the Backstage Pass notification list at oatleyacademy.com/BSPN, as in Backstage Pass notification. Join the notification list and we will email you as soon as the Backstage Pass becomes available. Once again, the Backstage Pass includes immediate access to all of our existing extended versions of the Artcast and Paper Wings, deleted scenes, my Q&A sessions from art schools all across North America, and our new exclusive podcast, Escape from Art Jail, designed to help you overcome the challenges that most artists would rather avoid: money, social media, and running your creative business. Again, that's oatleyacademy.com/BSPN. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Artcast. This podcast is a production of the Oatley Academy of Visual Storytelling. I'm Chris Oatley, your host and producer. Our editor is Kevin Chandler. Our production manager is Anya Marcos, and our editorial assistant is Ejua Ebeneba. Our theme music is provided by Storybook Steve. Recurring musical segments are provided by Storybook Steve and Kangaralian. Find more inspiring art and story podcasts designed to help you make a living from your own imagination at oatleyacademy.com/shows.